Welcome to Buried Truths, where the dust of time is swept away and history's deepest secrets rise to the surface. Before European settlers arrived, indigenous women played essential roles in tribal societies. In many Native American cultures, women were farmers, spiritual leaders, and held political power. The Iroquois Confederacy, for instance, allowed clan mothers to choose chiefs and guide decision-making. This matrilineal structure shocked European observers. Native women's influence in governance and community was significantly higher than what European women experienced at the time. These roles would diminish after colonization as European patriarchy was imposed on indigenous systems. When English settlers arrived in the 1600s, women's lives became defined by strict religious and social norms. In Puritan New England, women were expected to be obedient wives and pious mothers, confined largely to household roles. Their legal identities were absorbed into their husbands through coverture, stripping them of property rights. Despite this, women worked tirelessly in fields, homes, and family businesses. Their labor was vital to survival in early colonies, especially during food shortages and epidemics. By the 1700s, women contributed heavily to colonial economies. They ran taverns, worked in textile production, and managed farms during their husbands' absences. Widows often took over family enterprises. Some women, like Eliza Lucas Pinckney in South Carolina, pioneered agricultural techniques and business management. These examples challenged the idea that women were intellectually inferior. Educated women emerged in elite circles, often through private tutoring, and a few began publishing essays and poems that questioned female subordination as revolutionary. Ideas spread, so too did discussions about women's roles in shaping the new nation. Republican motherhood became a concept that women should be educated to raise virtuous citizens. Though still excluded from politics, women like Mercy Otis Warren wrote political commentary and influenced debate. Abigail Adams famously urged her husband John to remember the ladies when drafting new laws. Though her plea went unheeded, it signaled growing awareness of women's stake in independence. Women actively supported the American Revolution. They organized boycotts, spun homespun fabric to resist British imports, and managed farms and businesses. During wartime, groups like the Daughters of Liberty mobilized patriotic efforts. Some women even smuggled supplies or passed messages to soldiers. These acts, though often overlooked, were crucial to sustaining the revolution. Their sacrifices highlighted women's capability and resilience under pressure, even though official recognition remained absent. A few women took direct roles on the battlefield. Deborah Sampson disguised herself as a man to fight in the Continental Army. Others, like Margaret Corbin and Mary Ludwig Hayes, better known as Molly Pitcher, manned cannons during combat. These rare but bold acts proved that women could perform in traditionally male roles. Nurses and camp followers also endured harsh conditions, offering medical care and support. Their bravery became legendary in post-war memory. Despite their contributions, women remained legally and politically excluded after the war. The ideals of liberty and equality were not extended to them. Still, the revolution planted seeds for future change. Female voices had begun to enter public discourse, and questions about their rights were no longer easily ignored. The experience of war, labor, and sacrifice revealed women's strength. These early roles laid a foundation for later movements demanding full participation in American democracy. After the American Revolution, women continued to assert their presence in social reform. The abolitionist movement became a critical platform, with women like Angelina and Sarah Grimke boldly opposing slavery. They linked the oppression of enslaved people to their own limited rights. Their activism challenged gender norms, especially when speaking publicly. Quaker women also became central in anti-slavery petitions. By aligning with moral causes, women found a public voice, though critics questioned their place in politics. Education, reform, became another frontier. Women like Emma Willard and Catherine Beecher established schools for girls, arguing that women needed knowledge to educate future citizens. While their vision remained within traditional roles, They expanded opportunities for female learning. Slowly, more women gained access to secondary education, and a few entered teaching as a profession. Women's literacy rates improved significantly during this period. The idea of the educated mother reinforced women's societal value, laying groundwork for future advocacy. Women were also deeply involved in religious revivalism during the Second Great Awakening. Many became preachers, organizers, and moral leaders. These experiences empowered women to participate in broader reform movements such as temperance, education, and prison reform. The revival emphasized personal responsibility, which translated into a growing belief that women could shape society's morals. Women-led religious societies became widespread, offering organizational training and public speaking experience. Faith became both a calling and a platform for influence. The women's rights movement formally began with the 1848 Seneca Falls Convention, organized by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott. They drafted the Declaration of Sentiments, demanding suffrage, legal reform, and gender equality. Modeled on the Declaration of Independence, it declared, "All men and women are created equal." Though controversial, the convention sparked a nationwide movement. Women began holding regular conventions and circulating petitions. It was the first organized push for women's political and legal rights in U.S. history. During the Civil War, women took on unprecedented responsibilities. They managed homes, farms, and even businesses while men fought. Thousands volunteered as nurses. Through the U.S. Sanitary Commission, Clara Barton, who later founded the Red Cross, treated soldiers near the front lines. Others acted as spies or couriers. Women's war efforts expanded their skills and demonstrated their capability in national service. These roles blurred the lines of traditional gender expectations and paved the way for broader recognition. Two African-American women, Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman, became iconic figures of activism. Truth, a former slave, delivered powerful speeches like "Ain't I a Woman?" that linked race and gender oppression. Tubman, also an escaped slave, led dozens to freedom through the Underground Railroad. Both women defied stereotypes and operated in spaces white women rarely entered. Their heroism challenged both racial and gender boundaries, making them central to both abolitionist and early feminist narratives. As the Civil War ended, society began redefining roles, but women still lacked political rights. While African-American men gained suffrage through the 15th Amendment, women remained disenfranchised. This division fractured the reform movement. Some feminists felt betrayed, as they had campaigned for both abolition and women's rights. Still, the war had permanently altered perceptions of female ability. The experience emboldened women to continue organizing. Post-war America would soon see the rise of more structured feminist activism. After the Civil War, women's rights advocates faced the challenge of ensuring that the promises of emancipation extended to women. The 15th Amendment granted suffrage to black men, but excluded women. This exclusion sparked a division within the suffrage movement. Some women, like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, were frustrated by this setback. They continued their campaign for the vote, leading to the formation of new organizations, such as the National Woman Suffrage Association, NWSA. The late 19th century saw the rise of more women in the workforce, especially in factories and retail jobs. However, these jobs were often low-paying and lacked job security. Meanwhile, the rise of the new woman ideal, which emphasized women's independence, further fueled calls for greater access to higher education. Women began enrolling in colleges and universities, laying the foundation for future movements. By 1900, women had earned a prominent place in the professional workforce. The Progressive Era, starting in the early 20th century, marked an era of significant reform for women. Women began to assert their voices in areas of labor rights, child welfare, and social justice. Leaders like Florence Kelley, who advocated for child labor laws, and Jane Addams, a pioneer in social work, became nationally recognized figures. Women's organizations, such as the Women's Christian Temperance Union, WCTU, campaigned against alcohol, advocating for both moral reform and women's empowerment. The suffrage movement gained significant momentum in the early 20th century. The National American Woman Suffrage Association, NAWSA, merged with the NWSA in 1890, forming a powerful lobbying force. Under the leadership of Carrie Chapman Catt, the suffrage movement broadened its appeal. Women across the country began organizing marches, writing petitions, and lobbying state legislatures. The public debate over women's suffrage reached new heights, with both supporters and opponents voicing their arguments passionately. One of the most significant milestones came in 1919, when Congress passed the 19th Amendment. The amendment, which granted women the right to vote, was a hard-earned victory after decades of advocacy. The suffrage movement united a diverse range of women, from activists like Alice Paul to those with more conservative views, creating a broad coalition. The 19th Amendment was ratified in 1920, marking the culmination of the first wave of feminism in the United States. Meanwhile, the early 20th century also saw significant shifts in women's social and political roles. Women gained the right to own property in several states, and laws were passed to protect their rights in marriage and the workplace. The changing social attitudes allowed for more freedom of expression, leading to the rise of the flapper culture in the 1920s. These young women embraced new fashions and attitudes, symbolizing a break from traditional norms and signaling the beginning of the modern feminist movement. While the 19th Amendment granted voting rights, the struggle for women's equality was far from over. Women continued to face discrimination in the workplace, and their political rights remained restricted in certain states. However, the 1920s marked the start of a new era of activism and organizing. The suffrage victory provided a foundation for future feminist movements as women began to push for equal pay, better working conditions, and access to political offices. Following the suffrage victory, the 1920s saw a surge of social and cultural change for women. The flapper emerged as a symbol of the new, liberated woman, embracing more relaxed social norms. Women in urban areas embraced shorter hairstyles, shorter dresses, and greater independence. This was a departure from the traditional roles women were expected to play. At the same time, women's involvement in the workforce continued to grow, especially in retail, clerical, and service industries. Despite the advances in social freedom, many women were still relegated to lower-paying jobs. The Great Depression, which began in 1929, exacerbated the economic inequality. With men out of work, women were often seen as secondary earners. However, many women entered the workforce, out of necessity, taking up jobs as teachers, nurses, and secretaries. Some women also organized to support their families, starting small businesses or seeking work in newly emerging fields like radio broadcasting. World War II marked a turning point for women's roles in the workforce. With millions of men enlisted in the armed forces, women were called upon to fill the gaps in the workforce. The iconic figure of Rosie the Riveter emerged as a symbol of the women who worked in factories and shipyards, contributing to the war effort by building weapons and supplies. Women were essential in maintaining the wartime economy, making significant contributions to industrial production. Women in the military also saw expanded roles during World War II. The formation of auxiliary units like the Women's Army Corps, WAC, and the Women Air Force Service Pilots, WASP, provided opportunities for women to serve in non-combat roles. Though these women did not fight on the front lines, they served as support staff, pilots, and even mechanics, performing tasks that had previously been off-limits to them. Their contributions were crucial to the success of the military during the war. The war also led to greater integration of women into higher-paying jobs that had traditionally been reserved for men. Women began to work in more diverse sectors, including management positions in factories and industries that produced wartime goods. However, these advancements were often temporary, as many women were expected to return to domestic roles after the war ended. The post-war period saw the reinstitution of traditional gender roles, but women's expanded presence in the workforce was a sign of lasting change. The 1940s also saw the rise of women's political activism. Women organized to advocate for equal pay, better working conditions, and reproductive rights. The efforts of women like Eleanor Roosevelt, who championed human rights and social justice, helped shape the post-war world. In 1945, women were also represented at the founding of the United Nations, where they played a pivotal role in establishing global standards for women's rights and equality. By the end of World War II, women's participation in the workforce had reached new heights. Although many were displaced when the war ended, the foundation for future advancements in women's rights had been laid. The experiences of women during the war and the interwar period set the stage for the feminist movements of the 1960s and beyond. The legacy of women's contributions during this time would be remembered as a critical turning point in the fight for equality. After World War II, many women were pushed back into domestic roles as men returned from military service. Society promoted the image of the ideal woman as a homemaker and mother. Suburban life expanded, and women were encouraged to focus on raising children and supporting their husbands. However, many women were dissatisfied with this limited role. They had experienced independence and employment during the war and began to question why those opportunities had been taken from them so quickly. During the 1950s, while the dominant narrative focused on domesticity, some women sought to maintain careers or pursue education. Despite societal pressure, female college enrollment slowly increased. Women worked as teachers, nurses, and secretaries, though often faced discrimination and wage inequality. The seeds of second-wave feminism were being planted, even if quietly. Writers, journalists, and female intellectuals began to critique the limited opportunities available to women in post-war America, challenging the idealized version of womanhood promoted in media and culture. The 1960s saw the emergence of the second-wave feminist movement, which sought equality beyond voting rights. It focused on workplace discrimination, reproductive rights, and legal inequalities. Betty Friedan's 1963 book, The Feminine Mystique, sparked widespread discussion, articulating the frustration many suburban women felt. That same year, Friedan co-founded the National Organization for Women, NOW, which aimed to bring women into full participation in American society. The movement gained momentum, drawing from civil rights activism and growing dissatisfaction with gender norms. Legislative progress followed the feminist movement's rise. In 1964, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act prohibited employment discrimination based on sex. In 1972, Title IX barred sex discrimination in federally funded education programs. These laws had lasting impact, increasing women's participation in sports, higher education, and professional fields. Women also fought for reproductive autonomy. The landmark 1973 Supreme Court decision in Roe v. Wade legalized abortion, representing a major victory for women's rights advocates in controlling their own bodies. Women began entering politics in greater numbers. Shirley Chisholm became the first black woman elected to Congress in 1968 and the first woman to seek a major party's presidential nomination in 1972. Across the country, women ran for local and national offices, advocating for equal rights. Legislation. The Equal Rights Amendment, ERA, first proposed in 1923, was passed by Congress in 1972 but failed to be ratified by enough states. Nevertheless, political engagement among women grew stronger throughout the 1970s. Cultural shifts accompanied legal and political changes. Feminist publications like Ms. Magazine, co-founded by Gloria Steinem in 1971, challenged stereotypes and provided a platform for diverse voices. Activists held marches and protests, demanding equal pay, access to child care, and an end to domestic violence. Women increasingly questioned traditional gender roles, encouraging others to join the movement. The idea that the personal is political became a rallying cry, emphasizing that everyday experiences of women were shaped by broader systems of inequality. By 1980, the feminist movement had transformed American society. Though challenges remained, women had gained greater access to education, professional careers, and legal protections. The era inspired a generation of activists, leaders, and thinkers who continued to push for equality. Second-wave feminism laid the groundwork for future movements addressing race, sexuality, and intersectionality. The fight for women's rights evolved, but the progress made between 1945 and 1980 marked a monumental chapter in the struggle for gender justice in America. By the 1980s, women had gained significant ground in education, law, and the workplace, but challenges persisted. The feminist movement faced backlash, often labeled as too radical or divisive. Conservative figures like Phyllis Schlafly opposed the Equal Rights Amendment, arguing it would harm traditional family values. Still, women pushed forward, breaking into fields like finance, politics, and journalism. Media began to reflect evolving gender roles, showing working mothers and female professionals balancing careers and family life in a changing society. During the 1990s, third-wave feminism emerged, emphasizing individuality, diversity, and intersectionality. Unlike previous waves, this movement addressed the unique experiences of women of color, LGBTQ+ women, and others often left out of mainstream feminism. Women like Anita Hill brought workplace harassment into public discourse. The 1992 Year of the Woman saw a record number of women elected to the U.S. Senate. Representation grew, but issues like wage inequality, sexual harassment, and underrepresentation in leadership still required ongoing activism. In the early 2000s, women made major advances in business and politics. Leaders like Condoleezza Rice, Hillary Clinton, and Nancy Pelosi reached top positions in government. Female CEOs began to emerge in major corporations. At the same time, movements like Lean In, started by Facebook executive Sheryl Sandberg, encouraged women to strive for leadership roles and challenge internalized gender expectations. Meanwhile, debates continued about work-life balance, maternity leave, and whether systemic structures were still limiting women's progress. The 2010s brought a digital revolution in women's activism. Social media became a powerful tool to raise awareness and mobilize support. The Me Too movement, started by Tarana Burke and popularized in 2017, exposed widespread sexual harassment and assault, especially in powerful industries like entertainment, politics, and tech. High-profile cases led to public reckoning, with many perpetrators facing consequences. Women found solidarity across backgrounds, and the movement expanded globally, signaling a shift in how society addressed abuse and gender inequality. Women's political participation surged again. In 2018, a record number of women were elected to Congress, including many women of color. Figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar broke barriers and reshaped public discourse. Kamala Harris made history in 2020 as the first female, first Black, and first South Asian vice president of the United States. Grassroots movements, voter registration drives, and increased activism highlighted how women, especially young and minority women, were reshaping the American political landscape. Contemporary feminism continues to evolve. Today's movement focuses on inclusivity, addressing trans rights, body autonomy, and global women's issues. Issues like the gender pay gap, childcare access, and reproductive rights remain central. The overturning of Roe v. Wade in 2022 reignited debates over bodily autonomy. Women continue organizing marches, publishing critical works, and running nonprofits. Modern feminism also seeks to dismantle long-standing power structures while encouraging allyship, accountability, and equal opportunity for all gender identities and expressions. As of today, women are leading in nearly every sector, from science and sports to media and politics. Challenges persist, but progress is undeniable. Young women are becoming more politically active, socially conscious, and empowered than ever before. Generations continue building on the work of their predecessors with a greater awareness of intersectionality and global struggles. The story of American women is ongoing, defined by resilience, advocacy, and an unwavering demand for equity, justice, and the right to shape their own future. If you're passionate about uncovering the forgotten stories of our past, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Don't forget to like the video if you're enjoying the journey so far, and stay tuned, because there's so much more history waiting to be unearthed right here on Buried Truths.